This afternoon to discuss digital strategy. This is, if you like, our final kind of meeting before we start reviewing the digital strategies that are sent to us. So this is a kind of a good opportunity just to have a bit of a checklist to go through any final points that you may want to raise, and for us just to share a few updates as we go through the digital strategy presentation. So with no more ado, I'll start sharing my screen and we'll be led through this presentation. I'm joined today by my colleagues Gemma Quilliam, who works across the south and with our primaries there, and Bruce Wilson, who's our line manager at the moment and is running the educational technology department. Bruce works with some of our all through schools and a lot of our secondary schools. So good afternoon from us. We've got the digital strategy mailbox listed there as well. That's a general mailbox. If you think, oh, I'm not sure who to ask, if you ask digital strategy, then we all kind of pick up that mailbox, and our colleague Zoe manages that at the moment. So they're all our contact details. Hopefully you know us well enough by now, who to get in touch with, and that you can ask anything related to your digital strategy queries. There's going to be a very similar presentation tomorrow night for secondary colleagues, and some colleagues in all through schools may join that one instead of tonight. Today we've got a slightly primary focus, although actually the messages today are very similar, both primary and secondary. Okay, so tonight we've had our welcome. It's a chance also to look back and reflect, make sure we all know where we're heading with our digital strategies and the related documentation. And it's also a chance, to pat you on the back, say well done for all the work you have done. We're really encouraged by the strides schools have made. We've been really impressed by the commitment that everyone's showing, and we're very confident of getting a high return rate. So well done for everyone for taking this on. And we know we're asking a lot. We appreciate all the changes you've gone through in a short space of time, particularly over the last 2 years. But it really is a great opportunity to secure all the gains we made from lockdown and through all the difficult times where technology really did come into its own. So we want to make sure we capitalize on the success we made of that. So coming up the rest of this year, we're obviously coming towards that submission date. We've got tonight's meetings, and I know Bruce and Gemma, along with myself, are trying to book in as many meetings as we can with schools, just to go through anything, to finalise any bits of documentation or give our thoughts on it. That's happening, and there's still time to book things, as we'll kind of reiterate during the course of this call. We're also linking very carefully our kind of budget returns to this digital strategy. I know draft 2 budgets have been set. We may have the final draft 3 budgets, or I'm not sure how many drafts they go through actually, but we must be pretty close now to finalising the budget for next year, and that includes an element for digital strategy in your IT CapEx budget. And we've got the digital strategy document returns. That's going to be at the end of the month, and we'll make sure we cover that process a little bit today. And it's also good to know what we're aiming for. What does good look like? Well, I think the key message from us is there isn't only one good. It can look like very different and be very good. It doesn't all have to look the same, and because of that, we've got different templates you could use, or no template at all. We're not trying to shoehorn you in to the wrong kind of template for you. So what good looks like is something that really works for you and helps you develop your strategy over the coming years. We'll just talk about a quick checklist. Does your strategy document cover these things? That can be useful. And I'll probably ask Bruce to talk about in a bit more detail the hand-in process. What does that actually, what's going to happen? And then just to kind of reiterate that this isn't a one-off thing, that we've done the digital strategy, thank goodness for that, let's forget all about it. It's a working document and we need to move forward with it next year. So we'll have a few quick thoughts about what does this look like going forward, what's going to be expected of a digital strategy lead in 22-23 year. And as ever, questions and hopefully some answers, but certainly some questions. And if there is something that's beyond our immediate ability to answer, we'll certainly get back to you. And I think, Bruce, you've put in the chat there. Please use the chat to post any questions as we go along. At the end, we'll also have a chance, if you want to unmute, just to ask your particular questions. Okay, so that's what we're covering tonight, and I think it's worth just stating, what it is we're trying to achieve here. It's this 5-year vision, a blueprint for technology in our schools. So by the summer of 2026, we're all going to have these. They're going to be working documents. Of course, most of us are going to be ready by the summer of 2022, at least in its first format, and they will evolve, they will develop, and they will perhaps become more detailed as time progresses. But at this stage, we're looking for the first draft, the first implementation of your digital strategy, but it's going to be fully formed and a fully implemented document by that time. And as much as I try and help schools, and I'm sure Gemma and Bruce likewise, we're trying not to write it for you. We're trying to hand over the ownership of that, because ultimately it'll only succeed if it's owned by the school and implemented by the school. It can't be something that we do to you. You have to be very much at the center of this process, owning and tailoring it to your specific context and bespoke school needs. And this point is very important. Hopefully that's come across, is that we don't want this to be technically driven. This is not a technical solution designed by IT experts. It's a solution designed by teachers to support teaching and learning. And that's fundamental to our kind of belief about this strategy. So that's why you're on this call, teachers leading the digital strategy. That's very important, that it is not a technical exercise, it is a teaching and learning exercise. Okay, so all digital strategies will support this idea that technology is there not as a goal in itself, but as a tool to accelerate, deepen and improve teaching and learning. I mean, that's really important, that we're not into technology for technology's sake. It's all about improving the outcomes for children, making our teaching clearer, making the learning better, more available, more adaptive. And this is where this kind of goal about extending pupils' ability to learn independently. Now, it isn't just for secondary schools, it's for primary as well. It's how can we learn outside of the school walls as well as within the school walls, using as much kind of independence as possible. So that will vary according to the context of the school and the age of the pupils, but we're all striving for that kind of ability to learn independently and to try and address the digital divide. We don't want certain children to be disadvantaged because they don't have access to a device at home. With the kind of advent of the Chromebooks and the other technology in school, I know certainly from my schools, they're very keen on addressing any kind of digital divide. So they may have loan schemes for Chromebooks, or they may have clubs that are run for children at lunchtime, breakfast time, after school, to kind of address that need. And I don't know, Gemma, if that's something that you've seen in the fledgling digital strategies you've been working with.
Yeah, it's been a real different and model across all of my schools. So particularly some of them begin to look at actually more developing those digital literacy skills with the use of Chromebooks in Key Stage 2 as well, particularly when they've got schools within their cluster that are secondaries that they know they're transitioning into. That's been quite a nice way to close the digital divide as well.
Yeah, I think so. It needs to be a key kind of point of your strategy is not to leave pupils behind. We've got some really good examples of how technology can support the inclusion agenda through some of the tools that are built into Office 365. So it's a very important area. And then also to improve parental engagement in their child's learning. If children are learning at home, then we want parents, particularly in the primary age range, to know what they're doing and to be able to support them in their learning. And it also hopefully will create efficiencies and opportunities for teachers. That could be collaboration within school, but also between schools. And I think Bruce is going to talk a little bit later about some of those opportunities for perhaps collaborating more widely with the development of a kind of a network of teachers who can help influence the way we're moving with technology, particularly in terms of independent learning and software. So, our job is to encourage and support you. We're working on that plan with you. I think most of mine are on a 5-year kind of cycle. I don't know, Bruce, if you're seeing some shorter ones, 3-year ones, but generally it seems to be 5.
No, agreed. Yeah, no, that was just a sort of rough time scale. I guess the other reflection on that is that, and the reason why we sort of put that on the hub initially was that we're really conscious of different schools starting this journey at sort of different points, really. So there are some schools in the group across the different phases who are quite highly developed in that first priority, for example, and are ready for the second and third one. So yeah, that was the thinking behind that.
Yeah,
but no, long-term view, absolutely right.
Yeah, and of course that once we've got that plan, it's much easier to kind of plan that investment from a budgeting point of view. We're asking for this level of budgeting so we can invest appropriately, so we can get the right devices, the right infrastructure in our schools. And also, once we've got that kit, it's not the end of the story, is it? We need to make sure that schools and their staff and pupils and parents even know how to make use of the tools available to them. So, once you've invested in this kit, it's really making sure you get the most out of it. And at the moment, that may not have been our main thrust, but certainly as your digital strategy develops, you start implementing new bits of hardware or software. It's so important that you get the support and training that they're used efficiently. So this year, behind the scenes, we've been doing quite a bit of work in making sure schools have the right infrastructure so they can build on that. The infrastructure is such an important foundation. If you haven't got an effective wired and wireless network, then putting 150 Chromebooks in is not going to be a very good experience. So you have to get that right. And that's what we've been working on. So this year, we've our colleagues in the technology specialist team have kind of reported back on the state of the nation in our schools. They've looked at where the gaps are, who needs what doing, and we've got this funding from the school's condition allowance to spend on IT infrastructure, and that work's kind of ongoing. Some of the money's already been spent. Quite a bit of it is due to be spent in the summer holiday period, where wireless networks are maybe going in or servers are being refreshed, etc. Some of it will be delayed and maybe autumn term, October half-term projects, or later in the year, because we've got so much work to do. We're probably not going to have the capacity to do it all, or necessarily all the finance in place at the same time. So but rest assured, that is a commitment that will be met. If you've been promised SCA funded works, you will get it. Most of you will get it this summer. Some of you will wait slightly longer, but it will happen. Yeah, and as that point says there, it's the largest series of summer projects that we've ever ran. So with that, there are some risks. We've got, a number of different suppliers working in schools. With the best will in the world, things do go wrong from time to time, but hopefully we've been able to manage these projects effectively, and they'll all go according to plan. But if there are difficulties, complications, etc., then obviously we'll pick those up and do our best to support you in getting that remedied. But it's an ambitious program, and one that you may not see the benefit of straight away, but on the other hand, it's so important to have the Wi-Fi that works and the server that is secure, etc. Bruce, did you want to just mention something on that?
Just very briefly, Dan. Sorry to cut across, and completely agree with everything you've said there. So thanks for that. So just to say, in terms of the role of sort of heads and digital strategy leads, that there's nothing necessarily to do on this point, but we are really keen that certainly when there's significant works going on in your school, in significant projects, that you just know that it's kind of going on, really. So although Dan's right, all of that work is being led by kind of technical colleagues. It's sort of by now you you kind of should know, if there's something going on in your school. So if you've got any questions about any of that, just drop me a line, and we can fill in the blanks about the actual sort of projects in your school. Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Okay, Bruce. So stage 2, and again, a lot of work's already gone into this, thinking about your classroom kit. What is the right mix for you? It's not one size fits all. We've had, last time we spent quite a bit of time discussing the merits of interactive versus non-interactive screens, about the benefits of 2-in-1 tablet devices versus laptops. Again, it's for you to do the thinking about deciding what kind of mix of kit supports you, but as long as it works for you, and most importantly, the children get the best experience from that kit, i.e. it's bright, it's clear, it helps you model and scaffold and explain efficiently. That's what it's about at the end of the day. So we've tried to showcase what our schools are doing in this. We've heard from various people last time, about their particular solutions, and I know I think we had the Grange on, didn't we? And Chris was talking about his choice of board and screen, and we had a very eloquent discussion about the clicker from Hillview and how that worked for them. So that all those previous recordings are available if you're kind of interested in what's happening with our schools. And because of this digital strategy and the commitment, we have asked schools to commit a significant amount of IT capital for next year to support the implementation of that strategy. Now, sometimes a few schools have been for various reasons have had to kind of reduce that amount. We've had discussions about that, and sometimes we can work with that. But the main thing is that we have a conversation about it, and we're all sighted on what it is. So there's no point in having an ambitious digital strategy and then no funds to pay for it. So it's really important that we join up, the two sides. We want this, and this bit of kit, and therefore we need this, and this bits of budget in the various years that we're implementing it. So it's common sense, really, but we do really need to have that all joined up. And we're here to work with your technical team. I know Bruce every week virtually talks to the kind of the wider network managers group, and he fully cites them on digital strategy, and they're fully aware of it. And we've probably got a few colleagues from that kind of side of you know, network managers joining the call tonight, and there'll be quite a few tomorrow night as well. So it's important that we're all kind of sighted on what's happening. Moving forward, we've got a stage 3, which is where we're thinking more about the pupils. I know some of us are already thinking about that, because the way the equipment arrived, particularly the Chromebooks, it wasn't necessarily in the order that you'd normally expect. You'd normally go through quite a long process, but such was the opportunity, and also the necessity to get Chromebooks or devices to children quickly, that in actual fact we've ended up with quite a lot of Chromebooks. In actual fact, there over 25,000 of them in schools across United Learning. So to a certain extent, they've come in a little bit earlier than we might have planned. If we were thinking about a big Chromebook deployment, we would have done more work about, well, what's the good use of it? But we're catching up, and we're catching up quickly, and we're finding lots of schools have actually found the Chromebooks a really useful device, not limited at all, actually, but very versatile, very useful, not you know, across the whole curriculum, supporting cross-curricular work, yes, supporting computing, but more as a general tool to support, you know, learning across the piece. And some of those students have taken Chromebooks home, some have options to take them home. So again, it's a way of addressing that digital divide. And one of the key things for you to think about in your digital strategy is to make that refresh of the Chromebooks, you know, financially sustainable in the long term. So you may have, for example, 200 Chromebooks on your site. You know, part of your digital strategy is to think, is that the number we want to maintain moving forward? Because we like that number. It gives us, you know, the right number of kit for our pupils. But then we have to work out in our plan when we're going to refresh those, because pupil devices are on a pretty short cycle. Generally, it's a kind of a 3-year cycle for things like iPads and Chromebooks. I know schools are very good at sweating those assets longer, but from a, you know, a financial point of view, you really want to work in terms of understanding when you're going to refresh and the quantities you're going to refresh, so it becomes a fully sustainable project. I don't know, Gemma, if you're finding the same with me, how well the Chromebooks have actually been used in a relatively short space of time.
Oh yeah, definitely, and everything that you've picked up on. So I know there's some people on the calls where they were able to go one-to-one with them, but now they're beginning to think about, is that where we want to go? And if so, how can we sustain it? I've had others where I'm really beginning to see it for accessibility and inclusion. One of my secondary schools have had a large influx of refugees, and that's been really quite heartwarming, seeing how actually technology can support those children who have just come into the UK, how we can then ensure that they can fully access the curriculum. So yeah, it's been a really useful resource. And I know I should thank Emma, because there's quite a few people on this call who I've put in touch with Emma for the curriculum integration part of the Chromebook and digital strategy. So I'm going to do a little public thank you there for her.
Yeah, and we've got quite a nice case study that kind of showcases some of that work as well. That, you know, that was carried out at High Hazels, just showing, and that actually that picture, Emma, is a High Hazels classroom. You probably recognise it, and the key thing about that picture is that it's designed to show it's just another tool. You know, they've got a pencil, they've got a ruler, they've got a Chromebook. It's another tool in the armory for pupils, and it doesn't mean that the Chromebooks have to be used all day, every day. It's there, you know, if they want to do some additional research, or if part of the curriculum is being digitalized, then great, we can use our Chromebooks to do the digital part of the curriculum. I mean, one thing that's coming through quite strongly with a number of my schools, and I know High Hazels, this was one of the top of their kind of agendas, is about the carbon neutral agenda. And I know United Learning are, you know, are really keen to push that forward, and that kind of resonates with a lot of our schools. And if we can do our little bit in terms of the carbon reducing, you know, carbon via printing less, that's a good thing. So I appreciate they still need energy to work, but in terms of the overall footprint, if you can cut down your printing by digitizing more of the curriculum, then that could be a really good way, as part of your carbon neutral strategy. And I know that's certainly resonated with a number of schools. And we're working closely with our schools and sharing these kind of best practice models. Now, stage 4, this is where I'm going to kind of ask Bruce just to talk a little bit more about this. We've got a network, or we've started to put together a network of practitioners to evaluate and implement new technologies which add out to our understanding and value of what they bring. I don't know, Bruce, is it now an appropriate time just to perhaps put a bit of context around that?
Yes, absolutely, Dan. Yeah, happy to do that. Do you want to just pull the bullets up?
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks. So broadly, folks, as Dan sort of nicely summarised there, and echo those successes from this year. It's been a really, really good first year. We've always had sort of 3 priorities that we've asked schools to kind of consider in all of this in their own context. So we've talked about that classroom and teacher device piece. We've talked about the student device piece, but the third bit really overlaps the student device piece, but the last bit is this piece. We've got quite a lot of fantastic use of educational software right across the group across many phases. And long may that continue, really. Great that children have got devices, but it's what they do with them that kind of really matters. So in this bit, this is really sort of focused on that bit. So I wrote to digital strategy leads, I think, I can't recall the date, it was the back end of last term, just asking for involvement in a sort of cross-group, cross-phase working party that's really going to be focusing on this for the next academic year. I might reshare the email actually off the back of the communication off the back of this call, so there's still time to join that group. We're only going to meet once at the end of this year just to kind of get things going, so it's real activity will really kick in the next academic year. Sort of two main focus really. So one is a bit of a review of where we're at. As I say, lots of titles being used right across sort of primary schools. Lots of that has sort of grown organically through normal kind of teacher to teacher networks, word of mouth and that kind of thing. So we'd like to be a little bit more strategic about that, get feedback from schools, do a bit of review of what's in place. So that's the kind of the first point. But the second point, and probably the more important bit of the work of the group, will be some horizon scanning. There is emerging a sort of a genre of bits of software which really almost sort of fall into what I would class as artificial intelligence kind of band. All right, so this is really kind of smart software. So what I mean by that is the children are still getting a learning experience, but in the background, the software is kind of capturing data and feeding that back, so that increasingly the children get a very personalized experience, and more importantly, teachers and leaders get data that can inform next learning. So that's really on the sort of the edge of what we'd like to achieve in there. There's we've not bought anything as a group at this stage. There are lots of companies making some quite bold claims in this field, so I want to get that absolutely right. But I think this is where the kind of the real power of this will manifest itself in success for our kind of young people. I'll reshare the comms on that, Dan, after this call, but very happy to continue to extend that invitation to colleagues around primary schools. There's another piece of work that we'll be looking at as well, which is I think really appropriate for primary schools. At the moment, lots of these sort of software titles, youngsters are kind of logging on using various different kind of identities and passwords. So wouldn't it be nice if that was all kind of amalgamated into one environment that younger children, I think particularly, could log on to and once and get access to all of these kind of different systems. So again, that's part of our thinking. So yeah, I think that's all I'll say on that.
Good, because I mean, I know we've got a lot of software in use across all our schools, and it's sometimes just pooling the knowledge of that. I mean, I know
Yes.
we've got schools using Bug Club and others using Reading Eggs and some using accelerated readers. So we're just trying to want to make it a bit more explicit what schools are using and why they're using, what are the good points, etc. Just so we're much better at sharing intelligence on the kind of the software that's in use. So when a school start to review their software subscriptions, they're aware of what other options there are, and they can quickly kind of get a teacher view or a teacher kind of reviewed of a piece of software. So hopefully that will be something that we can develop next year, or start to develop next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate the feedback point, Dan, because obviously when people are selling these things, they make some pretty bold claims sometimes about the impact of these titles. Sometimes they're true, others less so. So to get, at our scale, one of the things we can do through this work is get a collective view from schools about the impact of various titles. So yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, so got a nice picture that Bruce sourced about handing in your homework. Yeah, well, by that we mean your digital strategy documentation. We've kind of set a end of June deadline for submitting it. I'm pleased to say the vast majority of schools are on track to submit at that time. Obviously, there are hundreds of different pressures on schools. We are understanding of that. If you've got a difficulty about, submitting by that deadline, just get in touch with your educational technologist. We'll be sympathetic, we'll help you, we'll kind of review where you are, and life will continue if you fail. If you do fail to submit it, we'll still be able to submit it later. But ideally, it's really helpful to have a line in the sand so we can over the summer start reviewing them and sort of sharing them amongst our team, etc., just so we get an understanding of where each of our schools are. We're here to help you. We've got a sort of 2 or 3 weeks left before that deadline. We'll find a slot for you if you need some help. We've got quite a lot booked in, final calls. But yeah, reach out to us if you haven't got a slot and you'd like to discuss it with your educational technologist. And this is something that's going to be increasingly important. Is the CapEx submission process may be a mystery to you, but there are certain times of the year where schools submit their capital requirements, i.e. their IT kit that is of significant cost, devices and servers, infrastructure, etc., and that gets approved at a finance meeting. So whenever you want to buy something for your digital strategy, it should be linked to your digital strategy and it should be budgeted for. And that's what part of this documentation is all about, making sure you know what you're buying when, and you've got a finance plan to fund it.
Oh, can I just answer Scott's question?
Sure.
Scott, I forwarded it to you, so Mike and I have already been working on it. So I know he's asked you to join this meeting. So yeah, if you check your emails, there's now a link to it. Apologies, I hadn't sent you doing it before.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And we will have a little chat about the different templates, etc., in a moment. But I think the key thing is be honest in your digital strategy. There's no point in writing something that you think, oh, that sounds good, or they'll be pleased to see that, if you've got no intention of actually doing it. So, but be honest where you are. Doesn't mean don't be ambitious, but you've also got to be realistic. So the honest reflection that can be shown in the tracker as well, and we've got these trackers. Well done for those of you keep updating it. The tracker is a means to an end. If you submit your digital strategy documentation and you haven't filled in your tracker, don't worry too much. The main thing is you submit your documentation, but the idea of the tracker was to kind of break that down into term by term expectations and things you should be doing. So by now, hopefully, and I did check one or two of my schools and they've updated their tracker really well, but hopefully we're seeing lots of green completed stuff. But be realistic, as we said on the last slide. Don't just fill it in green because you think you should have done. Make sure it's an honest reflection of where you are. I know we're behind, for example, on technical assurance, wherever that one is, this one here. Yeah, we're behind. Hands up, we'll hold our hands up. We haven't been able to do as many of those as we wanted. It will get done, but don't colour it green because you think you should have done it. Just leave it as an honest reflection. So a final kind of checklist for your digital strategy. We will share some of the templates. There's a couple in the toolkit. Whatever structure works for you, as long as you've got the main elements in it, the actual format of it isn't that important. It should focus on your priorities, and we need to, from it, be able to tell, what is the kit that you're aiming to supply in the classrooms and for teachers. That links to your vision. Again, what's the device mix for your students? What's the combination of Chromebooks, iPads, Windows tablets, etc. And a kind of a thought to how you're going to use this kit. It's all very well and saying, right, we're going to have, all these Chromebooks, we're going to have these iPads. Let's kind of identify how we're going to be using them as well in terms of supporting learning. And the key thing, it's an operational working document that if you perish the thought, stop being the digital strategy lead next year, you can hand it on to somebody else and they'll think, great, that tells me exactly what I've got to do, when I've got to do it by, who's doing it, and they can benefit from all your hard work because it's so clear in terms of what we're doing. It could be other things that you'll want to update. That tracker is useful, especially for you. Are you on track? Have you done the things you wanted to do? Is your vision still? You might have written your vision some time ago. Can you just check it? Is it still? Does it meet your requirements? And does all the other things, the stuff that you're buying, etc., meet the vision? Those two want to marry up to make sense. And how are you going to pay for it? This is your financial refresh plan. Could be the modeler that's on the toolkit. It could be an adapted spreadsheet, or simply a table in Word that shows what you're spending over the next few years to support it. And these may not be fully developed, but think about your CPD and the support you need, along with those implementations. What support do teachers need to really use the kit that you've bought, whether it's the visualizer, whether it's the Chromebook or the Surface Pro or a 2-in-1 laptop? What do they need? And in terms of your independent learning and that kind of strategy, are teachers aware of the the software platforms that you're using or need to use? So this is just a quick reminder, a quick kind of checklist, if you like. So your digital strategy has a vision, which tells us about the classroom kit, the pupil kit. Don't forget other bits of hardware that you'll need to refresh. There's a kind of an office admin PC, or quite a few of our schools have several. When do they need replacing? Double check your infrastructure. Have we got the right? Hopefully that's been done, but double check in case there's any further expenditure needed in future years on that. We need some sort of link to this, to your financial plan, so we can see, I don't know, next year you've got an IT budget of I don't know, 20,000, and these are the things you're buying, and hopefully they add up to 20,000 or thereabouts. So we want to kind of marry those up. What I'm starting to see is some of our schools are putting in the recommended budget. They may not need all of it for this particular or the next financial year, but then they can carry some over for the next year, which may require more expenditure or whatever. So it's better to have that way round and say, well, we've actually budgeted a bit more than we're actually going to spend. That's great. You know, nobody's going to take that money off you. It's there if you need it. But it's better to do that than have these grand plans that add up to 20,000 and then you've got a 10,000 budget for it. So, okay, what you're going to do, you're going to have to start pushing things into future years. And, you know, so make sure the two match up. As we mentioned, a CPD plan doesn't have to be an extensive document, but just, you know, let's have a nod to what's going to be needed. Maybe that feeds into next year's CPD plan. And I know schools start planning that quite early. You know, some of your schools may be looking at what CPD do we do next year? Let's get the calendar up, etc. So if you need some time for technology, then, you know, we've got to put that in. And I know schools are really pushed for CPD time. That's why it makes sense to kind of plan in a bit at this stage rather than leave it too late. And you need some support, but there's no time to receive it. And then a couple of things, you know, to think about on your strategy. You know, what are we going to do with the kit in terms of in-school usage? Are we clear? What about homework consolidation? Not all schools are going to be have detailed and complex homework policies simply because of the environment they're in, their local context. There's no point, you know, setting loads of homework that you know is never going to get done. But there may be other schools where that isn't the case, and the homework policy is quite important, and therefore where does digital come in? But all children would probably like the opportunity to consolidate their learning. You know, how can they find out, you know, what they did at school? How can they, you know, carry on their learning if they were so driven? So there are those kind of considerations that you ought to think about in your digital strategy. And because it's a working document, you know, who are you going to communicate it with? Would your governors be interested in this? It doesn't want to just live with you as a digital strategy lead. How are you going to share it? Is your head teacher going to see it? What's their involvement? What are governors going to feed back on and be aware of? So who are you going to communicate it with? How are you going to monitor and evaluate it? So over time, you want to be reflecting on, you know, we were hoping to do this with this particular hardware. Is it working? Was the CPD appropriate? How does it continue? And, you know, part of this digital strategy will be kind of putting in that kind of feedback and evaluation period, and we'll discuss that in a moment about the kind of next year and how that will work. I have just got a quick documentation here, and I don't want you to kind of think this is the way to go. It's just an example, but it just shows you, and I'm going to use Galfred because I've worked with them over quite a long period of time on it. They've got a vision that kind of says where they're trying to get to with them, you know, with their digital strategy and their technology plan. You know, it's not extensive, but it gives you enough detail just to understand what they're trying to do. It has the classroom kit quite clearly laid out, the type of AV equipment they're using, the type of devices their staff are being issued with, and the ratios of kit. In some ways, it's quite useful to put down this kind of ratio, because at least then you know what you're aiming for. You know, if you've got 400 pupils and 200 pupil devices, you've got a 1:2 you know, device to pupil ratio, and maybe that's fine. Maybe that's great. Maybe that's what you're aiming to do. High Hazels, because of their Chromebooks, they're looking at 1:1 in Key Stage 2. But unless you know what you're aiming for, then you don't know what to sustain. So I think it's a good idea to have a think about what your device ratios are in different parts of the school, so you can you know, equip it suitably to meet that ratio. So that's that little bit of it. And then they've done their audit about their school infrastructure. They know where they are. They know that they've got, I don't know, a 6 or 7 year life on their wireless, and their server may need some more work before that from the technical assurance process. They've identified their Office hardware will need refresh at some point in 23, 24. They've got a financial plan, a relatively simple spreadsheet that shows each year how many things they're going to buy, what things they're going to buy, and how much their CapEx budget needs to be to deliver that particular plan. And they've fairly slight reference to CPD, but that will be something they can develop and add to each year. What CPD is needed, what's the strand for that, and what about the final little bits? What about curriculum integration? What are their thoughts on that? Doesn't have to be that detailed. What about monitoring and evaluation? Again, how regularly are you going to do that? And we'll give some thought to that in a minute. So there's just, a simple document. It's a Word document, 2 or 3 pages, but I know, Gemma, your template using PowerPoint has been very well received, hasn't it? Do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint that has the start, so that checklist that you just shared with us with all these little boxes that's on it, and just some of the schools have found that useful because it then works through every single element that you've just said. I have got some examples that I've built up if anyone did want to move towards that. A real mixture of independents, primaries, secondaries within that. But yeah, it's more about, like you said at the start, you've got the ownership over it. So it's whatever's going to work best for you to then run your digital strategy. So
if you're struggling with documenting it and you need some example templates, again, reach out to us. We'll help you with that. But first and foremost, it's your document and needs to reflect where you are. So the returns process, again, I think perhaps Bruce, I'll ask you just to perhaps just talk us through what that process is going to look like. Just unmute yourself, Bruce, and I'll get all the bullet points up just for you to just kind of talk through.
You think I'd have the hand of this Teams mute thing by now, wouldn't you? Thank you. Thanks for doing the build. Yeah, just briefly, conscious of time. So what will happen after this call is our digital strategy office will drop you all the notes. It will be a personalized email rather than the sort of the generalized one. We'll send you a recording of this call. We'll send you the slides, yeah, Dan's gone through the sort of key things that we're kind of looking for there. But in that email, you'll get a personalized link. So if you remember earlier on in the year, we set up individualized trackers for individualized schools and kind of sent those out and shared. We've done a similar thing here. So my project team are just sort of busy creating kind of folders. So what you'll get essentially is a folder to upload your digital strategies and any associated documents that you think might be useful to us. That's it really. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate a few things, and again the email will say this. Please just give us an honest reflection of where you're at. I was visiting one of my secondary schools last week, and because of capacity, they've only really been focused on the first priority. You know, what's their strategy with regards to teacher devices and classroom kit, and that's absolutely fine. You know, we've got to work at the pace of schools. So if that's where you're at, you know, I'd rather have a look at that than kind of than nothing at all. So, and that's why sort of if you can send back that tracker as well. That would be kind of really useful for me and the team. I absolutely kind of back up what Dan said about continued support. I know I'm not going to change the homework deadline, but we are here absolutely right up to the end of term. And the reality is, the team and I will be looking at these things over the summer. So if you need more support up to and beyond the 1st of July, then obviously kind of reach out, and we're absolutely there for you. we will be sort of looking at these as a kind of collective, so reviewing individual kind of schools, but I'm really keen on getting the support that we pass back to schools in the next academic year absolutely right. So that's kind of part of the thinking as well. I'll perhaps pick up that point in a second, Dan. So that's why we've sort of put that last kind of bullet there. This is high challenge. You know, the group has got really ambitious hopes for this at school, but we genuinely want this to kind of be low risk. You know, do give us a genuine impression of where you're at, so that we can help you individually, but also collectively as well. So yeah, that you should get that email, I think, probably either first thing tomorrow or by lunchtime. It will have your individual folder link. That's where you can upload the documents, and yeah, support as necessary, kind of right up to the end of term, really. Thanks, Dan.
Yep, good. I see Gemma in the chat's put the link to the
Brilliant,
to the PowerPoint one. I say in the digital toolkit there are at least one other, maybe a couple other templates. So whatever works for you, really. Don't feel you have to change. You know, if you've started in one format and it's working fine, we're not trying to say you all need to be in a certain format. It's whatever works. So, but if it is helpful, then there is that template there that Gemma put together, and there's also a word-based one as well in there, depending on, you know, whichever you prefer.
There's a couple of people from my schools on here, Dan, who have used it, so I'm sure they'll be happy to say how useful or not it's been if anyone does need someone.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's very useful. I'm sure any kind of structure that helps people kind of get their thoughts down on the paper and give them some structure is useful. Yeah. So, you know, on that note, it's useful to gather your feedback. Obviously, you know, the overall focus has been on this, producing this document, working with you on creating a digital strategy. We tried to support you with hub resources. You know, the digital strategy toolkit has a lot more than templates in it. It has kind of videos, it has financial planners, it has audits forms and pupil voice forms, and it has kind of reviews of different classroom kits and so on. So it's a really, we think it's a really useful kind of resource, but your feedback on the usefulness of it, again, is very important. And also this developing digital strategy community, kind of Bruce alluded to a little bit more about how that's developing with one aspect in terms of the kind of software development. But we also need to think about moving this forward next year, how frequently you'd like calls. Is it half termly? Is it termly? What's going to work? What kind of content? We've got quite a lot of material in the digital strategy toolkit, but what more could we put in? You know, do we want to put in examples from schools, for example, that have gone through the process and, if you like, been approved? Would that be useful? Do you want to work more as a cluster, perhaps? I know some clusters are quite well evolved. I know the West Midlands one kind of worked together on their digital strategy. What's going to work for you on that level? And also our activity in supporting you going forward. Obviously, we will be out and about, we will be visiting schools, but we'll also be keen to catch up with you via Teams as well, because the efficiency of Teams, you know, not necessarily needing a visit. So it's just trying to get that balance right for, you know, you feeling supported, having us on site when it's useful, but also having kind of regular calls or catch ups over Teams. Yeah, so this is perhaps a chance maybe for people to either unmute or use the chat box just to kind of give any comments really on those questions and your feedback. I don't know if Bruce, if there's anything further you wanted to say on that at this stage, or it's really over to our colleagues in school.
Well, exactly that point, Dan. Really, just really keen on getting this kind of absolutely right. On the toolkit bit right from the launch. I think hopefully we were clear. This was not designed to be the answer. I don't think there is singularly the answer, but rather it's a framework to help schools develop this strategy in their own context. So yeah, any feedback on how successful it is in doing that would be warranted. We've got an opportunity this summer to review it, update it, improve it. So anything on that would be welcome. I noticed someone has put there overwhelming. I'm quite conscious about how consumable this is, particularly for primary schools, how big it is. So talk to us, and it's not set in stone. We can do it, and then all of those things really. What's right for you to make this successful, I guess, is the overall question. And whilst there is challenge about the ambition of all this, I'm just really keen on getting that balance of support right as well. So that's what sat behind that slide. We're going to time out, I think, now, but happy to take comments from a few people, or you've got our contact details. Happy to have feedback on any of those things at any point, really.
Yeah, if you don't want to say anything now, then obviously you can reflect on it and just let us know your thoughts, in a constructive way. I know we haven't got everything perfect. It's just useful to know where, what could we do better, or what's been really helpful, that kind of thing.
Just to add, Dan, sorry, the reason why the first one is highlighted is that we spoke to heads, particularly at the last sort of GEF, and they were asked sort of at a top strategic level, are we focusing on the right things, right? And the feedback on that was overwhelmingly positive. The feedback generally was we are. The questions below is, right, are we now doing the right things to help schools, to support schools to do that, I suppose is my sort of follow-up question. So yeah, I'll be quiet because we're taking up too much time, but happy to have feedback on that, any of that at any point, really.
Yeah, shall we?
Yeah, go for it, Emma.
I'll not take too much of your time. Mine is the little and often approach has helped. It really has helped with. Dan, you're right. There is Dan Cooper. That is. It is a big task, but the support given to our school, thank you, Dan Bunker, has been amazing as always, and our regular meetings just to keep on track, always being there at an end of an email. And I'm fortunate to have a good team at school as well who have taken it on board. I'm sure that when we disseminate through school, it may be trickier rather than the small team I work with. But a big thank you to Dan Bunker.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I think the point there you make about team approach is definitely something that I would echo, and Craven would have been very good at that as well, and quite a few schools have, where they've kind of tried to get a diverse team to lead this, so it just shares the burden a little bit. I think if you can do that, I know it's not easy. Some of the schools are quite small, so I appreciate where Dan Cooper's coming from. It's not that easy just to suddenly pick this up, and but yeah, hopefully we are here to help you, and we appreciate some of the difficulties with it. But if you'd like to give some thought about any feedback, then that's really useful. Just to reiterate these points, really, it's a live plan. We'll keep it up next year, keep the pace up. Look, I'm not expecting it to be quite as time consuming next year. It's more about maintaining and developing it rather than starting from scratch. So hopefully the curve will lessen a little bit. You still need to keep up with it, but hopefully the gradient won't be quite so steep. How often are you going to keep this going? Bruce and I talked about this earlier, but I think we definitely need a termly meeting. It may be more frequently, depending on where you are really with that. But just to keep the document alive. And then the other thing to think about with that is, your budget setting is generally in that spring term. That's a really good time to look at that financial planner and cross-check your spreadsheet for the next financial year. And are you putting the right budget allocation to it. So aligning those makes sense. And bear in mind that your capex purchases, there is an expectation that they're linked to this digital strategy. So you don't randomly go and buy 30 iPads if that's not on your digital strategy plan for that particular year. And keep talking to us. We're not going away. We'll still be here for you to support you. So we are just at the start of this journey, basically. So final questions then. I think Dan Cooper, you did ask, the tracker should show me what I need to do for the digital strategy. Yes, basically the tracker kind of breaks down lots of kind of complicated things into small steps. So if you haven't started to use the tracker, it's just worth looking at it. Obviously, if you're picking up late and a lot of those autumn term, spring term activities haven't been done, it will seem a bit overwhelming because you're kind of playing catch up really, but it kind of shows you what should have been done each term to make the process a little bit more manageable, rather than, to give you a term to put this together would have been a big ask. And I appreciate, you are picking quite a bit up, but again, we're here to help you. I think we've got a call booked in, but if you need more, just reach out to me. Any other questions from the rest of our group today?
Just to say, Dan, to the other Dan's sort of point, we've talked quite a lot this year about. I'm really conscious that loads of colleagues, some of them on this call, have only really started to lead on this EdTech, perhaps this year. And I'm really conscious that the advice we've given has been focused on, the EdTech itself and the pedagogical sort of strategies that sit behind that. But I've been thinking quite a lot about continuing to do that, but also a bit more support about sort of helping digital strategy leads to lead on digital strategy, if that kind of makes sense. That's outside the actual advice piece. So I'll give that some thought over the summer, because I think lots of colleagues have stepped up and done huge amounts of amazing work in year one. But I think perhaps we could do more to support on that point. I know when I first started to do it, when I first got my first leadership job, it was daunting. Particularly that overlap with the technical bit and the financial bit. I was really new to it, and I really struggled the first year I did it. So perhaps some work on that might be helpful. So you're not alone. No, you're not alone.
Yeah, great. Well, let me just put that last slide back up, just so you've got all our email addresses there. So, any feedback, any questions, you know how to get hold of us. We're not hiding from you. We're really keen to help you get over the line with this and get your submission in for the end of June. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining the call today. Hopefully it's been useful, been reassuring. It's pointed you in the right direction if you were a little bit unsure of what's happening. Most of our schools are in a really good place with this, and we're just going to help you get over the line for that end of June deadline. So thanks everyone for joining us on the call tonight. The recording has been made, and Bruce will share that on the digital strategy page as a link. So if you want to review anything, or if you want to pass it on to colleagues so they can get the same messages, please do so. But thanks everyone for joining us.